So, hello everyone. Welcome to Ask Advo's podcast episode. This is our first Zoom episode, so that's super exciting. Today we have really cool and special guests here, which they'll just introduce themselves. And for our episode today, we are going to talk about gender roles and issues related to gender within the Hmong community. So I'm gonna pass it to either one of you can take the mic.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mai Neng. I go by she, her, new pronouns. I am a Ph.D. student at UW-Madison in the Educational Policy Studies program. Well, today for my avocado related stuff, I'm scraping avocados to freeze because my avocados are going bad. So, yeah.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Lillie Lee. My pronouns following after my name are she, her, news. And I currently am a fourth year at Mary University, Wisconsin, majoring elementary to middle in special ed with a minor in Spanish. The best way that I like to eat my avocados is sprinkling salt and pepper on them and just eating them straight out. So pretty original like that.
And I forgot to introduce myself, but my name is Jenny Tam, pronouns she, her, hers, and I like my avocado just like whole, and then there's like a little hole once you take out the pit, and I like putting or filling that hole with sugar. That's really good. You should try it. Cool. Okay, so
Sorry, I forgot. I just realized I forgot to say how I like to eat my avocados. I like to mix them with eggs, so like an egg salad, but without the mayo. So like I use the avocado as the mayo, which actually it's really good too. So if y'all ever want to try that, and you can sprinkle some salt and pepper if you want a little seasoning in there, but otherwise I just eat avocado mixed with the eggs and put it in bread, and it's amazing.
that also sounds like really healthy. Like really healthy. Cool. All right. So this is a really interesting topic, and it might be helpful if we actually start off with like talking about who the Hmong community is. So anyone of y'all can start.
I guess I can explain a little bit. I think feel free to like fill in some more info, but the Hmong community is well. Let's start off with who the Hmong are. So the Hmong are a group that taken refuge into the United States from the Vietnam War. Let's see, we've been here for about 45 years, and our origins are mostly originated in China. So we have a very distinct and unique culture. I like to think in comparison to like other APIDA community, APIDA identities as well. Um, see my name if you would like to add more context. I'm totally
No,
blanking out.
I mean, I think like as a really brief rundown, right? I think you did a great job because I oftentimes when we do think about Hmong Americans, we are and we think about the history of Hmong Americans, our history kind of or we talk about history beginning the moment that the U.S. kind of entered into our lives, right? But of course, we've existed for hundreds and thousands of years before that, and like you said, in China, right? And then we have been in the Southeast Asian region for a really long time before the Vietnam War and the Indochina Wars. And yeah, so now we're here and we've been here. And yeah, I think we have a lot of common experiences as other Asian American groups. But I think it's interesting in that as Southeast Asian Americans, we also have experiences that are very unique to our communities, as like the Khmer or even like uh, Lao or Vietnamese communities as well. So.
Cool. Thank you for that. So the first question that we have here is pretty general broad, just to like lay down the premise. Who instills and maintains gender roles? Who sets those standards in the context of like the Hmong community?
I think in terms of who endorses and maintains gender roles is a lot the elders, more specifically, and more specifically, of course, like the men or the patriarchy that is in our culture. Maintaining the gender roles is most importantly maintained by our mothers or sisters or aunts upon girls in terms of setting these standards.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Lily, that you brought up about how it is oftentimes also maintained by women, right? It is, and that like I feel like a lot of the I guess the gendered roles, right, that we hold within our communities are kind of set by the patriarchy, but they're continuing to be perpetuated and upheld by everyone, not just men, but women within the community. And I think sometimes for a lot of women, at least I think when I think about women in my life, a lot of women who teach their daughters how to do certain things, right? Like how to do things like a nya, right? So anybody who is considered or is female presenting, they're considered to be a daughter. They're then taught kind of how to like do these duties that are expected of a nya or a daughter-in-law ever since they are young, right? And I think for some of our mothers, that's kind of their way of teaching us how to exist and navigate this kind of patriarchal world that we were brought into. So I think in some ways I think that it's not for a lot of them, it's not that they think that they're doing that to oppress us. They actually think that they're teaching us how to survive within this world. And I think that's an important context to think about. And I often think about that because I think as like, younger Hmong women, we often think about how repressive the Hmong community can be. And while that is very true, right, that we can't also use the standards of white feminism to understand the lived experiences that our mothers, our aunties, our grandmas also operate from, right? And there was a mentor that of mine that had once said, and I think this is really powerful, but she said, the Hmong term "bawat dia yawat jay," right? Which is that "bawat dia" is like the that the grandmas have done, and then "yawat is like that the grandpas have laid down, right, or done to. It's essentially the same thing, just a different way to say it. But she said, but we are going to be the future pa and yo, the future grandmas and grandpas. And so we have the ability to change how things will be for our children. Because the pa yo yo che is basically essentially this idea that gender and everything within our society and our Hmong communities, it's all constructed, right? It's created by people, so it can also be changed by people, and it can also be, and we can change the future for our children and our children's children. And so I think that's a hopeful way to look at it and to think about how we move forward as young people, right?
Also, in addition to like having that understanding as well, that there were different expectations and living styles, correct? How our elders used to live when they were younger was often based on survival, right? Farming, livestock, especially with the community, versus now that we assimilated in like American culture, the expectations to, or like the skills that we need is very much different and existing in American culture and community today.
Yeah, thank you both for saying that. I feel like that was a really good point about like survival, and I'm not Hmong, but thinking in the context of like my family or like my lived experience, how there's like trauma from like the ways that my parents have grown up and the lack of, I guess, like thinking about gender is a luxury a little bit, and it's something that we have like the space and time and a little bit of the privilege to do that, like I think our parents never had. And so in that way, I think though there's harm perpetuated, it's like partly informed by the trauma, and it's cool that we're like healing as we like get further, like as the generations advance, I guess, or like we're healing as generations are coming, or like as we develop future generations. And so the next question takes the Hmong narrative, but then ties it and looks at it through the Asian American lens. So, how does the racialization of Asian Americans impact the way that the Hmong community / APITA community thinks about gender roles? And how does that then inform the way that we perform gender expectations?
I think there's this like conflict, among youth in the PETA community. First we have to learn like our identities as a person of the PETA community, and also being American enough. I think there's this like two huge different expectations set, like based on gender roles, both in American culture and our PETA culture. I think I know that for me, that I experienced that as well. Everyone experiences this when it comes to performing gendered expectations, right? So I know in media, often a lot, and also in American culture, like Asian or PETA men are considered not as masculine, while having to maintain like cultural like expectations as well. So and as well, there's this huge fetishization of Asian women, right? Being submissive, because a lot, like in Hmong culture as well, we have to do everything that the male says because of that patriarchy, being existent there. So there's this whole like submissive quality that's like liked a lot about Asian women. So I don't know if Mai Neng, you want to add on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that the ways that Asian American men and women have been kind of racialized in kind of this American imagination, I guess. It really, I guess I'm also trying to think about like how we, because I'm thinking about, okay, like, the narrative and the racialized narrative that we have about Asian women is that they are submissive. But sometimes, like most of the Asian women that I know are like some of the most badass women ever, right? And so it's like, and that's like of all the women I know, right? Like Asian women are some of the most badass, and they are super strong, and I think, and I don't say that to say that like it's not okay to be submissive, right? Because I think everyone's just trying to navigate their survival in this society, in this world, and we do it in different ways, and I think that's okay. But I think that when we are up against this kind of dominant narrative about who we are, it doesn't leave a lot of room for us to be able to actually share our real lived experiences. And I think especially like, and I'm thinking about how with regards to Hmong women specifically, but like I've always kind of seen Hmong women as like people who are always, because of all the trauma that we've had to endure, like from the wars, and but also like the patriarchal trauma and all of that. Like I feel like Hmong women are always figuring out ways to survive, and I think and I'm thinking about like even during this pandemic, right? Like a lot of Hmong families have come across a lot of financial hardship. And so, but like you see on Facebook, right? Like all the Facebook lives, all these Hmong women entrepreneurs, right? And it's like Hmong women are always finding ways to support their families and trying to, um, they're always trying to figure out ways for their families to like be able to make it. And I think that's so cool. And I think about how like, even in the refugee camps, right? Like Hmong women were they realize that, hey, maybe if we start doing story cloths, we can actually make some money if we send it to the US, right? So they were doing that. And I think during that time too, right, like Hmong men were actually helping the ones that weren't like doing other things. They were helping in the household with like sewing. And so I know a lot of Hmong men that actually know how to sew from that time in the refugee camp, because they actually helped their wives or their mothers, right, with making these not just story cloth, but like bandao, like other embroidery stuff, right? And so, and that wasn't seen as like unmanly, and I don't think that they thought of it as unmanly until they came to the US, and all of a sudden it's like emasculine, right? For them to do embroidery, because that's considered such a quote feminine thing to do. And so I think that in the context of like us trying to survive, like you're right, like you're to your point earlier, Lily, about how like we're just figuring out ways to survive, and that we're not constantly thinking about how things are make us less of a man or less of a woman until we actually enter into a space that make us think that way, because it's telling us certain narratives about ourselves that then make us hate ourselves, or that make us believe that we actually are how do you say it, like these narratives make us believe that that's actually what our community is like, right? And then we try to fight it, right? And so it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just rambling a lot, but but those are kind of my thoughts, right? About like how racialization and colonialism, and also how yeah, how gender all kind of intersect for our communities. Yeah.
Yeah, like I know for a fact there's like a lot of dialogue too, like the difference between like a Hmong American woman versus, you know, a woman from the homeland or like Laos or Thailand, right? The different attitudes. I think there was a huge fear, like as soon as we came here, you know, we got taught like, you know, that aspect of thinking, like what is masculine, what is feminine, what is acceptable for a man to do versus acceptable for what a woman should do. And there was this fear that perhaps like a lot of the men will like lose a lot of control in terms of the household, right? So um as like, you know, there's a lot of cool women being entrepreneurs and being independent, there's also that like fear of like, I guess, that expectation that was set by the community, correct? Which led to like a lot of like a lot of like, it would segue a lot into the violence, which is unfortunately happening in the community, and a lot of limelight on the mental health that's on a lot of youth, especially, which really got me shook because, you know, like I just like know about students who are like younger than me, or like a lot of the students that my brothers and sisters had known who, you know, like unfortunately had like taken their lives because of these like expectations, or because of what the community standards are.
Could you say more about that? Like the how the standards are affecting young people's mental health.
I think especially among the Hmong, there is like youth, especially in the community, there is a lot of young people who are identifying as LGBTQ, correct? But it's still like a reoccurring theme that's like very new, especially among the community and the elders specifically. There's a lot of negativity, you know, being called too feminine or too masculine, a wannabe, or it's like kind of taboo, correct? So I know there was a student in the city that's like only 2 or 3 younger than me, or years younger than me, and unfortunately they committed suicide because of course there were probably a lot of other factors within the family dynamic, but you know, that conflict of identity, you know, and basically knowing that you won't necessarily be accepted in that close knit community that you have, or like that community that you have. I think it's very scary among the youth, and also a lot of pressure, especially on the youth. And also, in addition to, you know, the scary violence that's being put upon families, or like based on these expectations. I know in Appleton there was this murder suicide. I'm from Appleton, Wisconsin, so it was very shocking for our family because they lived only a couple houses away from us. So it was very.
Yeah. I think wow, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Like I think well, I guess something I do want to touch on with regards to what you had shared there is the issues regarding like our LGBT QIA plus brothers and sisters, right? Like I think it's hard when we think about gender roles and gender issues as kind of existing within a binary, right? And there's only room for female presenting or male presenting folks. And so folks who are gender nonconforming or folks who are trans, right, especially, and really anybody who has who identifies as part of the LGBT community, I think there's really no space for them to see themselves existing within kind of that like very binary understanding of gender and especially in a community where we don't often talk about these things. And I yeah and I think even like if we think about our rituals and our practices, and some of the things that are done, like if you are a woman, an understanding of how rituals are done for if you are a man, right, or what people think of as a man. There are certain understandings about how things are done for you, and oftentimes maleness and femaleness, gender, right, is attached to sex, and sexual organs of how someone was when they were born, and I think, and I don't think that. And I think that it is possible for our rituals to change in order for it to be inclusive of folks who are non or gender nonconforming or trans. Um, but I don't know like that right now in our community that currently exists, and I hope that moving forward we do continue to think about how to create a world that is a better world for all of us, but especially for like our trans and queer brothers and sisters, because I think for a lot of um I mean for all of us, right, like we all just want to live in a world where we feel loved and accepted and safe, and we currently live in a world where that's not possible for everybody. So I often think about how do we create a world that is where that is possible, and I think oftentimes that's a world that is different from the world we live in, which is this like cis hetero, like racist, white supremacist patriarchy, right? That we this is the world that we currently live in, and in order to really build a world that's better for everyone, we need to kind of dismantle all of these different things. Capitalists, yeah, I forgot to say that, but right, like we need to dismantle these systems that currently exist in order to be able to live in a world where everybody is free. Um, and I think yeah, sorry, I'm kind of rambling again, but I think that yeah, so I think the patriarchy plays a huge role in the ways that we feel we can or can't exist, and I think for even for cishet women, right, Hmong women, it feels really limiting in terms of like how the patriarchy is um I guess controlling our moves, but also controlling who we can or can't be. And you know, connecting it back to the murder suicides you're talking about, I think for a lot of men, that is the ultimate control for them, right? Like killing somebody, um, murder is the ultimate control, because if you want to have control over somebody and you can't control them, what is one thing you can do? You threaten them with death, right? And actually, sometimes you follow through with death, because that is in this patriarchal society, that is the ultimate control. So yeah.
And like I even think that patriarchy also like harms a lot of the boys and men as well. Um, Not saying that all men or like boys are like terrible or like they uphold this, but they have like also equally a lot of immense pressure, especially from the elders. So yeah, keep in mind that they're also victims of this too, because again, there are a lot of like elements of like toxic masculinity that's like exhibited from, you know, the men, that this is the way we think, like we do things, this is how things should be done, this is like the type of attitude you should uphold. But you know, like there isn't like also a safe outlet for them to like express their emotions and feelings in the community.
Absolutely. I think patriarchy hurts everyone. And I think, um, and that's the thing is like, when Hmong feminists, and really actually like any feminists, talk about breaking down patriarchy, right? Because we know patriarchy exists within every community in this world, right? That it's not unique to Hmong communities, it's not unique to Asian American communities. It exists within almost every society in this world. And but when feminists talk about dismantling patriarchy, I think a lot of men get all upset because they think that that means we want to get rid of men, right? And it's like, well, patriarchy isn't synonymous with men. Patriarchy is this much larger system that our world has been built around and with, right? And so when we're talking about patriarchy, we're not talking about attacking men. We're talking about attacking this larger system, and that men are also, you know, as using your language, like victims of, right? Like we are all victims of patriarchy, and how do we work together instead of thinking about it as like men versus women, right? In this gender binary world, right? And so yeah, I think that's really important to bring up, that it is something that we all need to work together to dismantle, not just something that we as women and queer folks like who see these things as issues that we need to dismantle.
Yeah, thank you both. I really appreciate all those points, especially thinking about like how patriarchy is harmful for everyone, and patriarchy puts power onto men, so they have also this power to perpetuate harm onto other genders. I guess like y'all already talked on like how it reinforces like a more binary gendered system. The following question is, how does gender roles affect relationships we have with others and ourselves? But I also wanted to add, Mai Neng, you talked about creating, I think you talked a little bit about like abolition, right? Like abolishing patriarchy and recreating and re-envisioning what that means for us. And so I think we talk a lot about that and would like in social justice work, but I wanted to hear like between the two of you, how does that look like? Like how would that look like if we were to apply that to our lives or like to the near future?
I think for me, from like my lens, dismantling patriarchy would look a lot like, well, a lot of it would have to start at the home, correct? So I think breaking those gender roles in a way, because in our society we treasure a lot the boys and the men, but I think it would be great if there's a moment where we prioritize or celebrate a lot more of the women in our families, in our community. Also being open to having like having that older figure who can like in a way dismantle this. So like having fathers talk a lot more about their feelings, or that it's okay to express emotions and talk about your emotions. Supporting a lot of the independent entrepreneur women out there as well. I think having this start at the home would be how I would see it, or see it being done.
Yeah, that's a really big question. um, and I think right too, right, that we often talk about abolishing things in our social justice work, and there's not a lot of concrete ways for us to think about how those things can materialize. So I think for me, I think about where violence starts, right? And as a Hmong woman, I feel like violence started for me ever since even before I was conceived, right? Like, and I say that because, we have within Hmong communities there are like medicine, chua, right, for to determine the gender of your baby, right? And oftentimes people are searching for the medicine that will make sure that they have a son, right? Or especially as a firstborn. I'm a firstborn, so I mean, thankfully, my parents weren't searching for that when I was born. They were just glad to have a baby, right? But I think that was a really big thing. I remember even like for our third sibling, my whole family was like worried that we wouldn't have any boys in the family. And so I remember after my sister was born, and my parents were thinking about having, before we came to the U.S., like when my parents were still thinking about having another child. Like I remember my grandma my paternal side, you know, like trying to look for medicine to make sure that the next child was going to be a son, right? And so, so I think for a lot of us, right, like that violence starts before we're even conceived, and so I think like we have to really start. There's a lot of places to start, but for me, I'm thinking about where, how we can start to dismantle these things in very concrete ways, and I think that's one way, right? Is what is it about our desire to have boys, right? That make us search so hard for medicine or for ways to make sure that our child that we conceive is going to be a boy, and then even after birth, right? Like where our placenta is buried. It if it's a if it's a child with reproductive parts, right? That placenta is buried outside the home or under the bed. And then if it's a child that is born with male reproductive parts, that child is buried under the main pole of the house, right? And so it's like, but then what about, I wonder a lot is like, what about intersex children, right? Children who are born with both reproductive parts, like how do they determine where they put the placenta, right? And I've always wondered this, but like because I know that there are Hmong folks who are born as intersex children, babies, right? And so it's like I'm sure that existed before we came to the U.S. So I wonder where their placentas are buried. But also, so it's like these very gendered ways that we do things, and that we then like, and if let's say you bury an intersex child as one or the other, right? That's violence towards their bodies. It's almost like the ways that Western medicine, how they alter and like surgically alter these babies to have certain parts, right? Um, I feel like that is a spiritual violence for intersex folks, right? Of like, we're just going to decide that you're going to be a boy, so we're going to bury your placenta here, right? So, and maybe that's not how they decided it. I don't know, but I think about that as well, like who we decide gets to be buried where, and then what they hold within our culture, right? And how they hold the spiritual world and our world because of who they are as their sexual reproductive systems exist, right? So yeah, so I think that's a very basic place to start, is like dismantling the ways that we think about who gets to hold what as boys or girls, right? And then how we raise them, because we also know that because of these gender roles, right? Like anybody who is born with female reproductive parts are then socialized as a girl, and they are then expected to do all these different things that girls are expected to do, and they're treated as if they're going to go marry a Hmong man, right? And so they need to be taught these things as if they're going to go marry a Hmong man, and not having any regard really for whether or not they're even wanting to be with a Hmong man, right? And same with the Hmong boys, like they are then kind of pushed into this certain way of being, or allowing them to do certain things that girls are not allowed to do, but then also being told that they are, if they don't marry a Hmong woman, and if they choose not to marry, right, that they are not a real man, right? um so yeah, so all of those things, but yeah, so I think just at the very basic level, like those things are some of the things that we can like start to dismantle and think about, okay, how get rid of these practices that are very harmful. How do we get rid of the ways that we perpetuate violence against our children before they're even, because they're not born gendered, we gender them as a society, as a community, right? And so I think that's, yeah, just going way back to the basics. But I think that's the place to start. So yeah, sorry, Jenny, that's a really big question, and that's one of the ways I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, if I could also add, like, I guess it isn't just for the Hmong community, more so like gender at large or dismantling systems in general. I think that there's a few things that has to happen before the imagining part or the envisioning part even happens, and a lot of that is like listening when someone tells you that they are in harm and that they're hurt, because I feel like something about like accountability and like accepting that we as humans we make mistake and we hurt people is like really hard for some people to do. And like I think it's important for us to just like listen, because I think a lot of the times like collectively we talk about what we want our futures to be all the time. We talk about how we want to be treated all the time. I think we know how we want to be treated, and I think as a collective, if we just like listen to each other more, that we could create that future, but it requires all of us. And I think the other piece of it is like recognizing that, just like doing a lot of reflection and questioning, like as you were saying, do these are these tradition, it might have helped in the past for us all to survive, but does it serve us anymore? Is it serving us anymore? Is it harming us? And like allowing us, like taking the courage to, sorry, is there like laughing in the back? I'm so sorry. Are we allowing ourselves and being courageous in and vulnerable and like allowing ourselves to change those traditions? And also reflection on like, if have we internalized patriarchy? Because I know personally I'm like for women all the way, and I think that there's still so many ways that patriarchy shows up in the littlest of comments, in the littlest of ways. Like for example, for me, like going into spaces and like lowering my voice if I want to take, like it's a survival tactic, and at the same time maybe I can reframe in my mind that my voice can show up however, and it should still be respected. But yeah, is there anything y'all want to add before we end?
No, but I just want to reiterate, just think that's really, really important, right? Like, I think in order for us to be able to transform our world, we definitely need to do some critical self-reflection, right? Like, because you're right, like we have also internalized some of these, like harmful thought patterns and harmful behaviors, and it is so important for us to be reflective of that and think about our own actions. Yeah, so I just wanted to read that point because that is such an important point.
Exactly. When you said, Jenny, when you said, I lower my voice, like another thing for me that I do too, like that sparked something in me, a habit of mine as a survival tactic is I apologize. I apologize a lot for like the smallest little things. And it kills me whenever I do it. And then like whenever I do something, like it's the smallest, tiniest thing that I just instantly have to apologize over and over again for like a huge like, and totally unnecessary. But yeah, like another thing that I read, trying to reframe as a woman is to say thank you for in substitute to saying sorry. But yeah, I totally agree with listening, because although a lot of points were covered, like in no way that's only like a limited view versus like a lot of other individuals in the community who can share a lot more insight. But being reflective as a person, being able to listen versus, I guess, speaking for everyone as a whole, and reflecting again, like those tiny little things, like apologizing all the time, to really see where we internalize patriarchy.
Thanks, Lily, for sharing. And I think it's a community effort. Like we work on board together, right? And I think something that I can do to support you is when you do apologize, I can respond by saying, there's nothing that like there's you have nothing to apologize for, or something to affirm you or like encourage you, because I think this work is so hard alone, and I don't think it should be done alone. And I think that those are ways that we can like learn to support each other. Thank you both so much for doing this podcast. It was amazing, and I felt like I learned so much and was deeply inspired by the both of you. Yeah, is there any last words or anything else that you both would want to share? Like, I don't know if y'all are working on any projects that you would like to share and promote, anything like that, anything at all.
No, but thank you, Jenny and Lily, for this opportunity to come on the podcast. I've really enjoyed chatting with you both, and I've actually also learned a lot from you too. So thank you both so much for this opportunity. And also now my avocado is ready for it's guac now, I guess, but it's ready to be frozen. So thanks for the opportunity and the time for me to be able to do that.
It looks so good. It literally looks so good.
Other than to support MAASU, of course. Look out for any future projects in the future. Also, question, Mai Neng, you have published work, correct? Do you want to elaborate more about that?
I was trying
Yes.
to.
Yes, I have a book that is published. It is called Déchets from My Liver to Yours. And it is a book of poetry. Although the introduction is it's a kind of a reflection of why I wrote the book, but also a reflection on my experience as a Hmong American college student at my undergraduate institution, UW Eau Claire. So I won't spend too much time talking about it, but if y'all are interested, the book is on the Her Publisher website, which I can share that link. But I heard I was just told that it's actually sold out right now. So this is the second time it's sold out. So I'm really hoping that they'll have it back in stock soon, because I know a lot of people have been wanting to get some for Christmas gifts. So yeah, so hopefully it'll be back in stock. But yeah, so the book is just a series of poetry, thinking about growing up in this cishet, patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist society. But yeah, there's a lot of reflections in there, and it's decent stuff. But 100% of the proceeds that I make from the book are being donated to the Critical Hmong Studies program at UW Eau Claire. So yeah, please support the book. And it back in stock.
You're so cool. I'm fangirling.